My name is Maria Lancaster, and I'm the founder of Embryo Adoption Services of Cedar Park. And I founded it with a pastor by the name of Joe Featon, who at the time was the head pastor of Cedar Park Church in Bothell, Washington. That was in 2008. And so we've been at this for a while, and we're a national organization, and we pretty much have 25 born babies a year now through this ministry. And we have lots of embryos available for adoption and would love to hear from people that are interested in adopting. I want to make things clear. So an embryo is a fertilized egg. And so a fertilized egg is a human being, and no other DNA from an egg source or a sperm source is required. So this is an egg donation. Egg donation is when women only, donate their eggs, but they must be fertilized with sperm. So what we do is the facilitation of embryo adoption, that is embryos that are already conceived with sperm and the egg, and they're already a complete and total human being, including the placenta and everything that goes into manufacturing, so to speak, a baby. The mother who gestates the child does not need to make the placenta or anything else. It is a total package that goes into the adopting mother's uterus, and the child born is neither genetically related to the mother or the father that are the adopting parents.
The whole process, you can take us through the whole process.
Embryos are the product of IVF, in vitro fertilization. In vitro fertilization means that a couple goes to a fertility clinic, they've had a hard time conceiving, and the fertility clinic harvests the eggs from the mother and mixes it with the husband's sperm. And then they make embryos, and then they transfer one or two to the mother and put the rest in the freezer. So the ones we're dealing with are the ones that have been donated by families who have created embryos for their own use, but can no longer have any more children for whatever reason, either physically, mentally, emotionally, or otherwise. They're done family building. And so then those embryos are made available to us from those families. And then we obviously have adopting families come to us. They go through an adopting family process, and the donors have a process. They have to fill out paperwork and everything. And then we match families by race, religion, and demographics.
I know you had asked me, you had already answered this question to me, and I already looked at your website. But for the sake of those who listen to this later and have asked this question, do I need to be married, or can I benefit as a single mother, a single woman?
Well, the donors pick the families, and the donors generally want to pick a family that has a mom and a dad, because if something happens to a single parent, the donors worry that somehow then the child, who's their biological child, is going to end up in foster care because the one and only parent that they had died. And now with COVID and a lot of other complicating things, people are dying that we don't expect to die. So donors are nervous when in placing embryos with a single parent for that reason, because they don't want to be in the position that they would naturally want to do, which would be to take the child, because the child would be a full sibling to the children they already have. But they gave these embryos up because they felt like they just couldn't have any more children. And so that is the juggling act with people that are single that want to adopt, is donors aren't really keen on the idea for the reason I just went into.
Okay, so that takes me to the next question. It sounds like then the donor has a say as to the adopting family.
Yes, we send the adopting family profile to the donor family first, and the donor families choose the adopting family first, just like in traditional adoption. So it's not the same that adopters come to us and get to look through a database and choose. The donors choose, but we make a narrow pathway for donors because we only present families to them that would be an appropriate match for the best interest of the child. And that's why we do racial matching, religion matching. Like if I have East Indian families, I match East Indian families to other East Indian families. It's the only thing that's logical. And so we send a portfolio of an adopting family to a donor family that's going to be fairly similar to who they are, because giving up your unborn children is no easy thing. And so finding people that are very similar in maybe values, looks, education level, donors are going to feel a little more confident and comfortable because the people are very similar to them.
Okay. They're doing the applications, the families that are adopting. Is medical comorbidities a factored in? For example, their medical condition. I know obviously with the baby, there is, issues. There can be issues when someone has probably uncontrolled blood pressure, and diabetes, but is this something that you factor in, or they are required to let the donor know?
Well, it is a factor. So how we get around that, since I'm not a doctor, is we have people who want to do this get a letter from their fertility doctor that they don't have contraindications to pregnancy. So contraindications to pregnancy could be high blood pressure, diabetes, other kinds of uterine issues that might be problematic. So I don't decide who's healthy enough. I let the doctor decide who's healthy enough. And then that way I don't get into any fights with people about stuff that, I'm not an MD. It usually is apparent to me when people apply and what they write on their paperwork that I can generally see that this is probably going to be an issue when they get to the doctor part of it. But that's not my job to tell them that. I just tell them to go to the doctor and get the letter.
Okay.
And if the doctor gives them the letter, then that's it. Then we go with that.
They're doing the applications, the families that are adopting. Is medical comorbidities a factored in? For example, their medical condition. I know obviously with the baby, there is, issues. There can be issues when someone has probably uncontrolled blood pressure, and diabetes, but is this something that you factor in, or they are required to let the donor know?
Well, it is a factor. So how we get around that, since I'm not a doctor, is we have people who want to do this get a letter from their fertility doctor that they don't have contraindications to pregnancy. So contraindications to pregnancy could be high blood pressure, diabetes, other kinds of uterine issues that might be problematic. So I don't decide who's healthy enough. I let the doctor decide who's healthy enough. And then that way I don't get into any fights with people about stuff that, I'm not an MD. It usually is apparent to me when people apply and what they write on their paperwork that I can generally see that this is probably going to be an issue when they get to the doctor part of it. But that's not my job to tell them that. I just tell them to go to the doctor and get the letter.
Okay.
And if the doctor gives them the letter, then that's it. Then we go with that.
Is that their doctor or the doctor at your clinic? At your
I don't have
facility?
so I don't have a clinic. we work with a lot of clinics across the country. And so, and because we're a national organization, we have many clients in different parts of the country that go to different clinics. And so it's their individual doctor that makes that determination, because obviously they have to be seen by their individual doctor, because that doctor is going to be the one to put the embryos in. So any doctor who is going to transfer the embryos will have done or should have done some tests on this person before they give a letter that there's no contraindications to pregnancy. So it's not that they just call up on the phone and say they want to do this. They have to go in and be seen, have some tests done, because from there, then that patient should be able to assume that their doctor is going to do this. So they don't just hand out letters like candy. You know, they have to be seriously evaluated before a doctor will write a letter like that. I will say it's rare for a doctor to say that. I don't have too many women give me letters from doctors that where the doctor says they can't do it. It's quite rare.
So how long does the process take? Sounds like there's a process. How long would you take generally it takes?
Well, there's different pieces to it. It's kind of like when although this isn't a purchase, but it's a process, sort of like buying a house. There's many steps. You have to first decide to sell your own house. Then you have to decide what your price range is. Then you have to go look at houses. Then you have to find a realtor. Then you have to find enough to narrow down a house. Then you go through the process with escrow and the mortgage company and inspectors and all of that. And so just like buying a house, sometimes it goes fast because things fell together. And sometimes things are a lot of work because need more paperwork from the donor clinic, need more information about the egg donor, so it can take longer than we hope it would take. But generally speaking, on my website, it says generally 2 to 4 months from start to finish, unless there's circumstances that complicate it. Not being able to get all the paperwork that's required from the donor family's clinic so that the adopting family's clinic will take the embryos sometimes slows things down, because sometimes clinics don't have time to cooperate on a timetable that's convenient for us. And so sometimes shipping arrangements drag out because we have to coordinate it between 2 clinics. And sometimes there's delays in one clinic can't ship it, the other clinic can't take it. So that might drag out for 2 or 3 weeks. So we don't really know exactly how long it's going to take until we get into each case.
What would you say is the success rate for embryo adoption?
Well, it varies. It depends on each case. It's sort of like you go to a car lot and you say, well, which car is going to run the longest? You really don't know. And there are factors, though. Older cars have more problems than new cars. Cars that have been in wrecks or, been in floods or whatever are more suspect to have problems as soon as you drive them off the lot. So every set of embryos has assets and liabilities to the set. It depends on how long they were frozen. It depends on the age of the egg source. It depends on if they were vitrified or cryopreserved. So rather than say, what is a person's chance of getting pregnant through embryo adoption, if you add them all together, the very highly successful sets of embryos on paper and the ones that maybe don't look that great on paper, and you combine them all, it's about 50% chance of having a baby per transfer. But all the embryos from a set go to the adopting family. So they usually have an opportunity to try more than one time. There are some sets of embryos where we know in advance that the embryos have a very high likelihood of success based on how they were frozen, the age of the egg source. And so on an individual basis, once a person is matched, we can do a little better job of basically telling people, well, you probably have a much better than a 50% chance, or the odds with these embryos are probably less than 50%. It doesn't make them not worth trying, but on an individual basis, once we have a match, then we can do a better job of guessing. And it's still always a guess, because even pre-genetically tested embryos that look perfect on paper cannot survive the thaw. And that's just a fact. And my daughter was actually frozen the old-fashioned way at 2 cells, which is only 24 hours after fertilization. And those embryos aren't even made that way anymore. But I had her and she's 18 years old. So I've also seen embryos on paper that just look terrible, make perfect babies. And so you can't always adequately predict. It's kind of like going to the horse races. Well, of the pack you have there, the first 3 horses that have won their last 3 races are the ones that are going to be the front runners, and it's going to look good on paper, but then you have a surprise that wins that you didn't really expect. And so we see that a lot. There's a lot of surprises that happen.
Is there, you're not, it doesn't matter whether they are Christians or not. Obviously you are Christian, and what you're doing, have you noticed, or are there adoptees or families who come to you and say I want to ask, are there religious restraints when it comes to, have you noticed anything? Have you ever had, for example, others say they cannot do this because of their religion?
No, because like I was saying earlier, we do religion matching. We have the majority of our family are Christian families, but East Indians are Hindus in almost all cases. Some of them are Catholic, but most of the time, East Indians are Hindus. Jewish people are Jewish people. And so that's a race and a religion. And so we try to match people that are of a similar race and religion, and we're not necessarily trying to make people that aren't Christians, because that's unrealistic. But we know that East Indian children are going to do better in an East Indian home, because they're going to look like their parents. They're going to be culturally, integrated. And so that's more important. And it would be wonderful, if everybody were a Christian family, but they aren't all. But we match people of like religions and backgrounds so that the children fit into their culture. So, and we try to, we have people that apply that are Catholic, and donors want their embryos to go to Catholic families. So we match Catholic to Catholic if that's what they want. So it's kind of driven by the individual families. I'm not trying to make people like me. I'm just trying to find people that are similar and match them, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you for the information, and just to hear of that revelation on where Jesus came from, in what you're doing. It's just you're on the same. It's a mind of Christ.
It is. I can't even take credit for that. It's just, this is something that the Lord gave me a burden to do. It wasn't even my idea. I already owned a separate company that I'd run for 20 years, and I made good money at it, and it was easy. I could make a good living and work 30 hours a week, and I wasn't looking for a job. But the Lord gave this to me and the responsibility of it, because he knew that he could trust me. And so it's something that God is in charge of this, not me. I get up and check my email and I tell him, okay, I'm starting my day. You can take over now, because this is something that he has to be part of, or I don't want to do it. Because we're not an embryo dispensary. We are an adoption agency and a Christian ministry. And the point of what we're doing is to bring people closer to each other, to God, and to make sure that that child is going to know that they are loved and appreciated, and celebrated for who they are and their talents, their gifts, and that they will be brought up in a manner where then they're going to be an exemplary person in our society, and a pillar of hope to others, because we kind of live in a fallen world, if you haven't noticed.